Hello again and welcome to another Creighton Report Extended, a book by Hunter Davies, who spent a year studying a comprehensive system in a comprehensive school. Let's have a look at the story so far. So Hunter Davies spent a year studying the 90 teachers and the 1,500 pupils to get first-hand experience of comprehensive theories in practice. We're at the stage now where we're talking about the heads of department. All the heads of departments, and Mr. Mims is actually head of the maths department. And he actually says in the book that he feels, because he was 17 years in the grammar school part of Tollington, which is now the south wing of Creighton Comprehensive School. He spent 17 years with grammar school students, and now he suddenly has a mixture of grammar school students and secondary modern students. And he actually says in the book that the first thing that struck him at Creighton, especially the older one, is they're obsessed by not competing. It's considered antisocial to try and beat people, to try and get better grades than them and try to be in top groups and top sets and streaming and all this stuff. I can actually say that that is not my experience at Creighton School at all. So let me start off with the sign of the times. The sign of the times, 1972/73. No internet, no calculators, no mobile phones, no electronical gadgets of any kind, no Game Boys, no Walkmans even. This is the time that we lived in, and this is what we saw on television, Christmas 1972. All the rage. You got to remember that there was only 3 channels on television. There was BBC One, BBC Two, and ITV. Everyone was watching ITV. BBC One and BBC Two were more elitist channels. So I go the next day to Creighton School and I ask everybody, did you see what I saw last night? Yep, the stylophone. Everyone's talking about the stylophone. Everybody. Jeffrey Edgar, this really nice friend of mine, he walks into the class and I said to Jeff, did you see what we saw last night? He says, yep, the stylophone. Me and my family are going to get it. How are you, Jeff? And I just said to Jeff, I said, now, if you have a look on the net, you'll see a 1978 commercial which actually tells you the price of the stylophone. The commercial that I'm talking about, which I couldn't find, is actually in 1972. There was no price on this commercial at all. So I just said to Jeffrey Edgar, just out of a matter of interest, I said, do you know how much this item's going to cost? And Jeffrey Edgar says to me, yeah, $3.50, $3.99. And I said to him, no, I didn't know, but I just guessed, and I was right. I said, $19.99. Now you're probably not thinking much here, but let's change this. Let's change that scenario to 21st century prices. So I say to Jeff, do you know how much that's going to cost? And he goes, yeah, $19.99. And I say, no, £99 99p. And he sort of looks at me as if to say, no way. Needless to say, no one that Christmas got their hands on a stylophone. It was much, much too expensive. Anyway, a few months later, I'm playing in someone's garden and I suddenly see on the ground, I see this stylophone. It's all wet and it's all groggy, it doesn't work. And I said, who threw this away? So I gave it to my dad, who was a bit of a whiz kid in electronics. You know, he used to be a hobby of his. He used to know everything about electronics. I said to my dad, can you do anything with this? And he looked at it and this and that, you know. The next day he's got it working. And I'm starting to learn how to play it. And I start learning a whole load of tunes and I decide to take it to school the next day. My dad insists, I don't think that's a good idea. No, I want to show everybody at school. So I walk into school next day and I start playing. Everyone's really impressed. You got a stylophone, you got a stylophone, you got a stylophone. Yeah, yeah. And this friend of mine, Kelly Reid, this nice big coloured guy, he says to me, please Andreas, please, I want to show it to all my friends in other classes. I said, please. I said, Kelly, okay, you can take it. He brings it back to me at the end of the day, it's broken. And I said, what's happened to it, Kelly? And he says to me, I haven't done anything to it. And I looked at it, wouldn't work, gave it to my dad. My dad insisted that someone had opened it and pulled out all the wires. You know, I got a feeling that Kelly Reid wasn't the type of person to do that. But I said to my dad, can you fix it? And he said, it is permanently broken. Easy come, easy go. You know, £100 hydrant is just gone. I learned a very big lesson because my dad said from the beginning, you shouldn't have taken it to school. So we're in the first year of Creighton School, 1972, 1973. We're in the maths class with Mr. Day. Now, Mr. Day was a probationary teacher. You know, the kind of teacher who spends a year and then they decide whether they keep the person on or not. Anyway, Mr. Day, I think he was pretty good. Remember, the first year you are all together. It's a mixed ability group. These are all the people in the class at that time. So as I say, we're in a mixed ability class. I'm sitting next to the cleverest kid in the school, definitely the cleverest kid in the class, David Singleton, who I said before looked like Magnus Pike as a 12-year-old. This is actually what he looked like. Yeah, half of Wayne's World. You know, he actually looked like that. But I did actually respect David Singleton a lot. He was really, really clever. And sitting next to him, I would always try and keep up with him. I actually believed that I was the second best at maths in my class. If I had said that to my classmates, they would have laughed at me. But you know, I worked hard to try and be the second best. In reality, there was another guy called Michael Peppou. He was really good as well. So in reality, I was the third best person in that class. So Mr. Day would do a lot of board work, but he was also working from these books. Now, I've looked on the net. It was these mathematics books. They were the size of novels, and it would have book A, book B, and you would go all the way to book Z. I looked all over the net. All over the net to try and find this book. I could not find this book. And then by chance, I'm watching an episode of Grange Hill.
And then by 5 again.
And Mr. Keating, their maths teacher, is teaching the pupils maths, and he's holding one of the books that we used to have, and suddenly I could find it all over the net. It was an SMP book, Book A, if you have a look. That's the school maths project. And we used to work from these books. I mean, we used to get through these books really, really quickly. So at the end of the year, Mr. Day gives us our very first maths test. We never had another test over the year. It was the very first test. Now, this wasn't proper exam conditions. We were just sitting in the class. So I'm sitting next to David Singleton. We do the test, and then the next day we go into the maths, and Mr. Day reads out all the results, and I'm getting really nervous. What score have I got? And he says to me, 79. And I was as happy as punch. I said, oh, I got 79. 79%, that is. David Singleton gets 95%, and I walk around the class and I go up to Michael Peppou. What did you get? He says to me he got 80. I said, yeah, I got 79. Michael Peppou turns around, you cheated. I said, what do you mean I cheated? You cheated. You copied David Singleton. And then Pericles Atlaliotis, who's next to him, yes, Andreas, you cheated. David Singleton comes over. He didn't cheat. I can tell you, he never looked at my paper once. He cheated. You know? And the worst thing about it is even the teacher thought I cheated. How do I know this? You know when you record something in your mind and you're waiting for your result? Mr. Day, as he's reading out the results, David Singleton, 95. Andreas, 79. You know, and what the hell is going on? I mean, my workings were all on that paper. And I can even remember the questions. It was 10 questions. The first question was an intersection question. You would get 2 points. I remember you're not given graph paper. This is on ordinary line paper. And you would give them intersection points, and 2 lines would intersect. And this is what it should have looked like. And this is what mine looked like. This was the first question, remember? And I just put underneath, these do not intersect. The worst thing about it, after the exam, Singleton looks at it, he goes, Andreas, what's that? What are you talking about that they don't intersect? And he shows me his paper, and he shows me that they do intersect. And Singleton's actually telling me, do you want to change it? Now, if I had changed it, I would have said that was cheating. But the point is, as Mr. Day is picking up all the papers and everything, I can see in the corner of my eye that he's looking and seeing that we are comparing our notes. And I was sort of trying to say to Singleton, look, put your paper away. I don't want the teacher to think I cheated. You know, he must have thought I was really clever, you know, sort of, yeah, Andreas gets the first one wrong, you know, gets the first one. I mean, the first question's worth 10 points. I even lost 10 points there. If I had got that one right, I would have had 89 points. I would have beaten Michael Peppou hands down. But, yeah. So and another thing is, we had a trigonometry question, and I remember I'm only a first year, and I know I had to times 360 by 3. And instead of timesing 360 times 3 the normal way, the good way, I didn't want to take any chances, so I added them up, and all my workings were there. Mr. Day just didn't want to know. And then, I'll never forget it. After he read out everyone's results, he looks over to Jeffrey Edgar, and Mr. Day crosses his arm and goes, what happened to you, Jeff? Jeffrey Edgar got 34. 34%. And I think there was another girl in our class called Wendy, I'm not sure. But she was expected to do well, and she got in the 30s as well. And what happened to you, Wendy? And if I was back there, no, seriously, if I was back there, I would have said, why are you complaining to Jeffrey Edgar and Wendy why they got... How do you know how well they're going to do in an exam? This is the first exam we've ever had at Creighton in mathematics. How do you know, and why are you criticising Jeff and everything? And he would have turned around to me and said, Andreas, if I were you, I would shut up because you cheated. Anyway, everyone in the class, everyone thought I cheated. I remember walking out with Jeffrey Edgar, and the last sentence he said to me before he walked off to his lunch, he said, look at me, Andreas, I didn't cheat, and look where it's got me. And he walked off fast to his lunch in the North Wing, and I'm sort of thinking, even my best friend thinks that I cheated. But having said that, you know, I don't blame my peers. If Jeffrey Edgar had been sitting next to David Singleton, I would have thought that he had cheated as well. Or if anyone had sat next to David Singleton and suddenly got 80, 90%, you know, I would have. I can understand. I don't blame them at all. I will never forgive Mr. Day because he actually had the paper. He could see all my workings. He should have known that I wasn't cheating. And the next day, he's sitting in the front of the. I mean, me and Singleton are sitting right in the front, and he's talking to the class, and he suddenly turns to me and Singleton. Some people even set out the test the same. I said, if I was back there, I said, Mr. Day, how am I supposed to set out the test? There's only 10 questions. What am I supposed to do? Start with question 5 and work and do question 1 and 3 and do it in some kind of, Rubik's Cube method. Of course it's going to be the same way you're going to present it. But no, he just was adamant that I cheated. And obviously that was obvious proof that the teacher thought I was cheating. And Singleton turned around to me and he says, do you want to, at the end of the lesson, do you want to talk to the teacher? And I said to Singleton, what would be the point? So I would have loved to have been the fly on the wall in the office where Mr. Day asked, can I continue my contract at Creighton School? And obviously Mr. Mims, who's head of department, must have been there, and he said, I'm sorry, you've had your day. But why? I've tried so hard. I said, we don't think that you made the grade. Now, I would love to think that's what happened. In reality, Mr. Day might have just left on his own accord or just gone to teach at another school. But whatever the outcome, whatever the reason that he left, it was like goodbye and good riddance. So we're now in second year maths. This time we're in Mr. Mims' class, the head of department. And I'm sitting next to Jeffrey Edgar, and he looks around the class and he says to me, Andres, do you think we got put in the bottom group? And I said to him, we got Mark Barum and Simon Kowalski in this class. What do you think, Jeff? Of course we've been put in the bottom group. So Mr. Day's last act of defiance was to pick me out and throw me into the bottom group. I get there on some cruel twist of fate, and obviously Jeffrey Edgar gets there on merit. So we're in the class, Mr. Mill, we're still working from these books, as I told you, these A to Z school math project books, and we're working through that, so it was okay. I mean, if people wanted to mess about in the class, they could. You're working at your own pace. Mr. Mims, I remember, didn't do any blackboard work at all. You're working from these books and you carry on, and me and Jeffrey Edgar were virtually working together. So I remember there was one time we did a long multiplication, and always caused me trouble, that. So I asked Mr. Mims, and he comes over and he goes, yes, Andreas, okay, and he does it for me. And you remember long division, don't you? A long staircase right to the bottom, and he does it, and he walks away, and he goes, there you go, Andres. And I'm looking at it, and I'm looking at him. This didn't happen, but if I was back there, I would have said to him, Mr. Mims, have you ever heard of the phrase, helping a man to fish? And he would have said, what's this got to do with fish, Andreas? And I said, yes, Mr. Mims, it's got nothing to do with the price of fish. I'm trying to tell him that, you teach a man to fish, and you fed him for life. You catch a fish for somebody, and you've only fed him for one day. I didn't know anything. He had done it all for me. I'm not to say, Mr. Mims was a really nice guy. I'm not saying a really, really nice guy. But I don't know. It was probably just as well we had these A to Z books to work from, because I'm afraid Mr. Mims was actually no help at all. So it comes to the end of the year, the second year. We're up to the test. Remember, at this particular point, you're not in an exam room, you're not in a hall, you're just in a classroom doing a test. It's only the second year. So I'm sitting next to Jeffrey Edgar, and the classroom wasn't like every desk was faced the front. You had a collection of 4 desks sort of in angles all over the place. It was all one of these progressive classroom environments. Anyway, I'm sitting next to Jeffrey Edgar. Opposite me is Mark Jones, and behind me is Mark Duff. And all Mr. Mims does is he writes down questions on the blackboard. It's the old-fashioned blackboards where, if you remember, it wasn't one of those that you throw upwards. You would write, and as he was doing the questions, he would actually rub off the question and do another question on top. One of the questions, I mean, this was so ridiculous. One of the questions was a question like -3 + 4. You know, it was questions like that. And Mr. Mims even put a little line, a linear line, so you could count across. I thought this is really ridiculous. But me and Jeff, we were sort of working together. What we would do, we had these little papers, not even A4 size, little lined papers they were. You know, the kind of paper that you tear out of these little exercise books. Those kind of things. So Mr. Mim just tore them out and just gave them all out. Okay, fair enough. We're writing there. Me and Jeffrey Edgar, we would look at the question and then we would write it down. We would finish at the same time and then we would look at another question. Oh yeah, we know that. And we would write the same. No cheating, no nothing. I wasn't looking at his work or whatever. Another question, just to give you an example of the kind of quality, the caliber of the questions was, one question was, if a dozen apples cost a shilling, how many apples can you get for 75 pence? It was that simple, you know. So anyway, it was just too many questions. It was too many questions, and at the end of the test, Mr. Mims was collecting all the papers, and he goes over to Mark Duff's table, and Mark Duff says to him, Mr. Mims, the test was basically easy. The only problem is we didn't have enough time. And Mr. Mims says to him, I will sort out that when I do when I calculate everyone's result. I will take that into account, Mark. Don't you worry. While he's talking to Mark Duff and I'm looking at him, he had all the papers like this, and suddenly he dropped them. He went, zoop. Just imagine a pack of cards. It would just go like this, zoop, zoop. But he actually dropped them on the table and he went like this. Oh, and I said to myself, oh my God. I just had that worried feeling. I just had that really worried feeling. Anyway, it comes to the results. So Mr. Mims addresses the class and he says, I've given the first boy, Jeffrey Edgar, good for him, he gets 100%. He didn't have to give him 100%, but he knew that no one could finish the test. What he could have just said was the first boy, Jeffrey Edgar, was first, and he gave a list of everybody in order after that. So Jeffrey Edgar, good for him, he gets 100%, and he says the second boy is Mark Duff. So Mark Duff comes second, congratulations to him. Jeffrey Edgar turns to me, you know, Jeffrey Edgar, we're friends and everything. You must have come third, Andreas. The third boy is Mark Jones. Oh, Andreas, not too bad, you've come fourth. The fourth boy is Patrick Brosnan. Oh, Andreas, Jeffrey Edgar. Andreas, you must have come fifth. The fifth boy is Roger Meggs. And I'm thinking, oh, what's going on? Andreas, how bad's this going to get? Don't tell me you didn't come sixth. The sixth boy is Gareth Alcock. And I'm starting to read, everyone's quiet in the class. And me and I have to laugh, and Jeffrey Edgar is starting to laugh and everything. You can imagine it, everyone else is quiet. It's just me and Jeffrey Edgar that were in fits of laughter. And then he says, the seventh boy is Michael Francis. And Jeffrey Edgar, and I couldn't help but laughing, but I'm actually really embarrassed at this point. And then Mr. Mims says, the eighth person is Andre Cove. And at this point, I just wanted the earth to swallow me up. And I'm sort of thinking, why don't you be quiet, Jeffrey Edgar? This is humiliating and laugh. And he says, you didn't even make ninth. And then he says, the ninth person is dear Hajipappas. And I'm laughing and laughing, we're both laughing ahead of, and it went on and on. The 10th person is Kelly Reid, and I sort of think, Jeffrey Edgar is laughing and laughing his head off, and I just wanted to die at that point. It's just, and in the end, Mr. Mims says, and the 13th person is, lucky for some, Andreas Charalambos. So I actually came 13th in probably a class of 15. In between me, I think Mark Barum and Simon Kowalski. I can't remember which one was above or below me, but I finished in between them. Now, let me give you an idea of how Mark Barum and Simon Kowalski, all they used to do was play flick football. It was a game where you get your pen and you get a piece of paper and you just go, ting, ting, you know, I don't know if you remember that game, or flick spaceships, you know, they would attack, you know, they would attack each other with flick spaceships. Or if they played a game called Noughts and Crosses, that's tic-tac-toe for you Americans, it always depends on who starts first of who wins. This is an example of their games. You know, so that was the level, that was the quality of Mark Barum and Simon Kowalski. You know, depending who started first, you know, would win the game of tic-tac-toe. So I was totally humiliated. Of course, Geoffrey Edgar had his field day. You know, I mean, really embarrassing for me. And as I walk up, I'm walking out of the class now, and I pass Mr. Mims on his table. And Geoffrey Edgar's all somber now, and he says to me, "You did really badly in that test, Andres." And I just turned and I said, "I know. When I go home, I'm going to do myself in." And Mr. Mims gave me a look like, oh my God, what the hell's happening? I'll be honest, if I was Mr. Mims, I wouldn't have let me go. I would have phoned up, I would have got Mr. Macdonald down, you know, the tough head of year that we had. And Mr. Macdonald wasn't all bad. He would have come up to me and he would have said, "Andreas, it's only a test. It's only a test. You know, it happens to the best of us." And I would have said, "Yes, sir, but it also happens to the worst of us." Yeah, you know, and Mr. Macdonald would have phoned my parents. I would have had to have an escort to go home to make sure nothing happened to me. But Mr. Mims actually let me go, and I would imagine that he spent all weekend, you know, up all night thinking, oh no, you know, Andreas is going to do himself in. And I can imagine Monday morning he must have phoned my tutor, you know, my form tutor, and said, "Did Andreas Charalambers come in this Monday?" "Yeah, he's sitting right here." You know, "Oh, thank God." But yeah, you know, obviously I was going to do myself over some silly test. So this is why I wore red today. You know, never, ever wear red.
Captain.
Year, 3 boys move up to the top set. That's Geoffrey Edgar, Mark Duff and Mark Jones. So they go into the O-level class. I have to stay in a CSE class. This is a good time to tell you the difference between O-level and CSE at that time. A GCE was what grammar school kids used to do. It would be an O-level, and it's a General Certificate of Education. Now a CSE was a Certificate of Secondary Education. So a CSE is what they would normally do in secondary moderns. Yeah, if you get an O-level, everyone wanted to get in the O-level class. Everyone wanted to get into the O-level class, at least the people with a moderate ambition. You've passed an O-level if you get A, B and C. If you get D and E, they were fails, but they were a grade that was significant enough to be recorded. If you had CSE, it was graded 1 to 5. Getting a grade 1 must be actually, I mean, the exam was a lot easier. A lot of simple questions, but you would need something like over 80% or so to get a grade 1, which was actually equivalent to an O-level. If you got grade 2, grade 3, grade 4, grade 5, they weren't worth the paper that they were printed on. And a lot of teachers and everything were going around, you know, because everyone was getting upset that they were in the CSE class, and they were saying, no difference. There is no difference between O-level and CSE. And we would hear this all the time, because, you know, once you get into a CSE group, you know, you felt a bit depressed. And I remember even Mr. Macdonald, who was the head of our year, we used to have assemblies every Monday, and he spent the whole assembly. I mean, I can't remember how long these assemblies used to last, but at least 20-25 minutes. And he would say, there is no difference between O-level and CSE. As I said, he spent the whole 25 minutes trying to explain this. And then at the end of the assembly, as we're walking up to go, he says, oh, by the way, if you have any aspirations of being a doctor, don't if you're doing all CSEs. And I went, oh, what was the point of that whole assembly? So there was a difference. It's like saying there's no difference between grammar schools and secondary moderns. You know, it was as ridiculous as that. Anyway, so we're in the third year, and this time I'm in the maths class, still in the bottom group, with Mr. Plumstead. Really, really lovely guy. And we carry on working from those books I told you, A to Z. So I'm in another class now, and Jeffrey Egg comes in with Mark Jones, and they come in with Book X. Look, Andreas, we're on Book X now. You know, you're going to get really behind in your bottom group. You know, we are really advanced. We're on Book X. So I can see now, you know, yes, Jeff, yeah, Book X. Very adult, isn't it? You know, very sordid now. Mathematics has become really sordid now that you're on Book X. But the good thing is even if you're in the bottom group, I was on Book X as well. So I start Book X. And I'm really happy that I'm on Book X now, you know. I feel like an adult, you know, all the sordid stuff, you know, that Jeffrey Edgar was telling me that was in the book. You know, I'm only joking, but you know what I'm saying. You know, really advanced stuff now, this Book X. So I'm working, you know, everyone, as I said, works in their own pace. So I'm working through Book X, and I'm doing loads of them halfway through the books. Every Friday we would give our exercise books to Mr. Plumstead, so he would mark them. And I would get my book back, my exercise book back, and I would go through. It would just be a big red cross. See me, see me, see me, see me. And Kelly Reid's looking at it. You got an awful lot of crosses there, Andreas. And I said, yeah, tell me about it. It was like, oh no, start Book X from the beginning again. So at the end of the year we do the test. As I say, you know, you're not in a big hall or anything, it's just a classroom, we're just third years. And we're doing the test, and I look over to Kelly Reid, and I see that he's writing a novel. I sort of think, you know, what are you doing there, Kelly? You go, no, you know, and he's really into, he's writing this, he's writing that. It's just a whole list, there's no numbers. It's just a whole list of writing. I'm sort of thinking, what the hell's going on? You look like you know what you're doing. Anyway, we hand in the paper, fair enough. He's marked it, and the next day he says to us, Mr. Blumstead, lovely man, he marks all the papers. Now, I would like to think that this happened. I would like to think that he was in the staff room with the head of department, Mr. Mims, and Mr. Mims would say to him, you know, Mr. Plumstead, I really embarrassed Andreas last year. I shouldn't have announced all the results in front of the class. And Mr. Plumstead would say, oh, don't worry, I've sorted it out. Now that might never have happened. It might never have happened, but I always like to think that it happened, because if someone could tell me if this was the way Mr. Plumstead would do things when he announces the result of the test. So we go the next day, and he says to us, before he announces the results of the test and everything, he says, what I have done is I have made this graph. Now, if you're not into maths, you won't understand this, but the top boy, if you can imagine, what he did, he turns the graph upwards, so the lower down you are, you get 3 bonus points. So he made the graph to 4. So the lower you are, you know, you get 4 bonus points. And as you go up, the top boy didn't get anything. So he moved the graph, if you understand that. Anyway. So I'm sort of wondering, I wonder why Mr. Plumstead did this. There was no reason to do this. You find out there was a reason actually. Anyway. Mr. Plumstead's method was that you would go up to him and he would tell you your score. So I went up to him and he says to me, you got 48 out of 64. Now that was the highest score of the class. You know, it's all, you know, he whispers to me, Andreas, you got 48 out of 64. Okay. So someone asked me, what did you get, Andreas? 48. And Mr. Plumstead sort of looks up at me as if to say, isn't this supposed to be a secret? And I wanted to say to Mr. Plumstead, I said, I'm top of the class. Of course I'm not going to keep it a secret. Anyway, everyone gets their results. What's yours? What's yours? Kelly Reid goes up and he whispers in his ear, you got, and Kelly goes, I got 4. What did you get? 4. I said, was it your novel? Didn't he like your novel? So I think you can understand why Mr. Plum's a lovely man, why he moved the graph there. I mean, God knows, you have to be good at maths here. God knows what Kelly Reid would have got if Mr. Plumstead hadn't moved the graph, if you know what I'm saying. But that was the third year, and then in assembly, I remember this was assembly in the South Wing, which we don't usually have assembly in the South Wing, but I do remember it was in the South Wing. And Mr. Mim gets on the microphone and says, oh, there's only one change for the math department, and that's Andreas Charalambous is to go up into the top group. And that was in front of the whole of of our year that he said that. And it was sort of, retribution, if you know what I'm saying. Sometimes it takes years to actually get to the place you want to go. In life, sometimes you only get one chance. Here I had 2-3 chances to get into the top group. And I remember Larry Montag coming up to me and said, well done, Andreas, you are now moving up in the world. It was the seal of approval from him. So now I was actually in the O-level class. So now we're 4th years, and now I'm in the top group, and I'm sort of thinking, am I going to handle it? Because for 2 years, I was in the bottom group. But I was really surprised. I mean, we finished the A to Z. There was no more books of A to Z. We actually got through those really fast. In 3 years, we got through 26 little books, novel-sized maths books, and now we were working on things like accumulative frequencies. I can't remember too much. It was probabilities and fractions and this and that. And it was all quite simple. And I'm sitting next to the nephew of the teacher. Our teacher now is Mr. Evans, and I don't remember his name, but he said to me, that's my uncle. And I said, get away. Get away, is your uncle. No, straight up, he's my uncle. I don't believe you. Uncle Evans comes over. Mr. Evans comes over. He didn't believe that you're my uncle. I said, I believe you now. By the way, can I call him Uncle Evans? No. But anyway, he wanted to keep it secret and everything so that people didn't think that he cheated in exams. But that was his uncle. Anyway, Mr. Evans, a really nice teacher. We used to get through. The level of the classes was pretty basic anyway. And I do remember at the end of the year when we did the test, it was just like, obviously a cumulative frequency and things like that, and probabilities and stuff like that. And I do remember there was volume of the swimming pool. Now it was a complicated volume of the swimming pool. You had a deep end, this and that. But it was pretty simple stuff, even in the 4th year. And I wonder if Mr. Evans remembers, he probably doesn't remember this, but I was the very first person, this is a bit of history for everybody, I was the first person to have a calculator in my class. I wasn't the first person to bring it to school because I told you the other story with the stylophone. I wasn't going to make that mistake. I was the first person to have a calculator. So we're doing long division, really long divisions, like something like, 315 into 6,025,025, something silly like that. And it was really, really tough stuff in the class. And word got around that Andreas has got a calculator. Andreas has got a calculator. Andreas has got a calculator. Anyway, it gets to Larry Montag's ears. And he's not going to keep that quiet. And he says out loud, I hear you got a calculator, Andreas. Pretty useful for what we're doing today. So Mr. Evans hears this, and I'm thinking, oh, here we go. And Mr. Evans walks towards me, and I'm just looking down, and I can see his fingers. And he says to me, you got a calculator? Yes, sir. Make sure you do all your calculations properly. Yes, sir, no problem. Anyway, this is the calculator I had. It was the old lead crystal display. It's really simple. It only had times. It had a percentage and everything. I've still got it, actually. I've still got it. But this is the actual picture of it. So yes, this is what my calculator looked like. Lead crystal display. Really expensive at the time. A few years later in Mr. Evans' A-level class, he's doing a calculation on the board. And just before he gets to the end, he turns around. Anyone got a calculator to finish this off? And they would finish it off. And I wanted to stand up to Mr. Evans and say, what happened to doing things properly, sir? You know what I'm saying? So the calculators got more complicated and this and that. A few years later, they decided to let calculators into the exam. I told my dad this. I said, did you know that they're going to let calculators now into the exam? And my dad burst out laughing. I said, what's so funny? What's so funny? Ha ha. And I bet you some children are still going to fail. I say, yes. But that was really funny when I read in the newspaper that they were going to allow calculators in proper examinations. So now we're in the fifth form mathematics, and suddenly the mathematics has gone from this level to this level. Really, really hard stuff. I couldn't believe it. You know, it was almost as if it sort of went from this level to this level overnight. And by some cruel twist of fate, we had our mocks in December. God knows why. God knows why. December 1976, we had our mocks earlier. Usually you have them in January. And I swear to you, it was the toughest paper I've ever seen in my whole life. You know, there was no sort of get a few easy questions in and, you know, you can work from there. The questions kept on coming at you and coming at you and coming at you. And I remember sort of working up a real sweat in that exam. So anyway, that exam's over. And I remember me and Mark Duff, a few days later, we walk into Mr. Evans' maths class. And Mark Duff, he says to Mr. Evans, "Are we doing the O-level, sir?" Mr. Evans is sitting down in the corner and he gets up and he says, "If you got over 40%, you're doing the O-level. If you got under, you're doing the CSE." And Mark Duff went, oh, I don't know how much under he was, but can you imagine, he's 2.5 years in the O-level class and suddenly you're told that you're doing the CSE. So Mr. Evans didn't say this, but he might as well have. He says to Mark, look, you can stay in the O-level class, but I've arranged this nice little losers sections. 8 other people didn't make the grade. He's put them all next to the window doing CSE, but don't worry, at least you've got a nice little view out the window. And if it's any consolation, all 8 of you have cost the overburdened British taxpayer an extra 70 quid. You know, in those days, for instance, you had O-levels. To mark them, it cost £25 to mark an O-level, and it cost £35 to mark a CSE. So I've converted that, so it's £10 difference, but I've converted that to 21st century money. So it must be at least 70 quid. So Mr. Evans might as well say, and as a consolation, you have caused the overburdened British taxpayer an extra 70 quid each. But I thought that was really sad. You know, you go all that journey and then you end up in the losers section, the CSE section, the losers roll. But at least you've got a nice little view out of the window. So it comes to the O-level time. Those doing O-level, those who are doing CSE are doing CSE. And we come to the exam. There are 12 questions. 12 questions, and you've got to choose 7 from 12. And I remember doing a transformation question. I mean, it was really easy, so I got 1 in the bag there. Then I do another one, got another in the bag, that was easy as well. I do another one, that was easy too, 3, and I could only do half of another one. So in other words, I was looking at the other questions. I mean, they might as well have been on another planet. I do not know I couldn't even categorize what they were asking, what form of maths they were asking. There was one question I remember, it was a paragraph of text, and in the middle of the text it had R squared. I was sitting there and I was looking at it. I said, what the hell is that? Anyway, I knew that, I could only do 3.5 questions. I knew that I had to get 100% in those 3.5 questions. Otherwise, that's a fail. You know, I couldn't even attempt it. I couldn't even attempt the other 3.5 questions that I needed. But anyway, I did get that, and I did actually pass. I got a C, but I just felt, well, if the transformation question was so easy, and the other ones were so easy, you know, they should have been on the level of each other, you know, and I should have got, well, you know, an A, you know, do you know what I'm saying? But in reality, I think the right people passed, and the right people didn't. I got a C. Okay, I got a C. My friend Minas Jacobs, who is, he's a university graduate material, let's face it, he got a B. David Singleton, I felt a bit sorry for him because the A star, the A distinction wasn't around. So he got an A with Michael Peppou. But I just felt that I should have got an A as well. But I think the right people got the right thing. And, You know, with Mark Duff and Jeffrey Edgar, you know, I've had a look at an O-level now, and I couldn't believe it. There was one O-level I saw, there was the same standard as the second year that I told you, you know, with the 1 shilling is half a dozen apples, and how much do you get, how much does 75p make? It was as easy as that. You know, Mark Duff and Jeffrey Edgar would have got an A star, A of the distinction, of this distinction, of the star of the distinction. Do you know what I'm saying? But the last thing I want to say about it is, you know, Mark Duff and Jeffrey Edgar, they were good at maths. They were good at maths. In 1977, being good at maths didn't pass you the exam. You had to be very good at maths. To get a B, you had to be very, very good at maths. To get an A, excellent, and obviously Singleton was, and Jill Peston, you know, they were absolutely brilliant at maths. They would have got an A star at that time. But yes, Mr. Mims saying that there's no competition, and it's, you know, and the people find it unsociable to compete with each other. I think that is strictly not true. I think it might be true for Mark Barum and Simon Kowalski. They didn't care about competing with each other, but I can tell you that we competed hand and nail. So that's it. That's the conclusion. That was mathematics in a comprehensive system through the years as I personally experienced it. And incidentally, about a year later, I'm doing a different exam in the hall, and I look behind and I see poor Jeffrey Edgar. He's in the line where he's doing his retake maths O-level, and I'm sort of thinking, yeah, felt really sorry for him. But that's the way the cookie crumbles. Edgar! That's it, it's me. Remember me, Edgar? Edgar! What happened to your 100%, Edgar?